We are putting the finishing touches on the 2024 Miami Dolphins offseason blueprint by looking at what the Dolphins can do after June 1st, what a 53-man roster forecast could look like with how I've chosen to attack the offseason, and a 2025 salary cap health update.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I am your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting. You can find our shows on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Tip of the cap to our everydayers, because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. We are finishing the 2024 Miami Dolphins offseason blueprint, our annual pre-free agency week-long series that's dedicated to what is the direction of the team, what are the prerogatives that we understand they're going to pursue, what resources do they have, and then I put my GM hat on and try my best to come up with a finished product that's a competitive team for the year ahead. Now, I've had a couple questions for those of you on the YouTube channel. So if you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor. Look at me. I'm not changing transactions as they happen. So you're going to see Jerome Baker's on this roster because before free agency started and before their efforts for cap compliance started, I had a different alternative method to getting compliant. And Jerome Baker may end up being back. I chose to pursue Noah Fant in free agency as compared to the Dolphins this morning officially announced the signing of Jonnu Smith. Don't expect to see Jonnu Smith on the 53 because this was all finalized. I mean, this was an obnoxious amount of prep to get the whole offseason lined up the way that I wanted it to and make sure that you're researching the players and free agency and your options and market values, trying to budget accordingly. And we'll get to 2025 cap health update in segment 3 today. But I had somebody ask, when did we sign Noah Fant? We didn't sign Noah Fant. I, in my hypothetical offseason, targeted Noah Fant as the preferred option at tight end. So when we get to August, we're going to hold the offseason blueprint up against the actual 53-man roster and see what's different, which is one of the really fun things for me. It was fun to do last year because I looked at the team that was there in August and I said, that's better than I did. I would expect nothing less from professional franchise and the actual understanding of what's available versus a lot of this without being able to interact and engage with agents and players, engage their interest. Harder to get a better feel for what the actual true market is or players that come available in trade and stuff of that sort. So, we are going to get into the post-June 1st money here on the 2024 Miami Dolphins offseason blueprint. If you missed it yesterday, we did the mock draft. Wednesday was the Tua Tagovailoa contract. Tuesday was free agency, both internal and external. What I would do with the resources available. And after all of that, the team that I had assembled for a post-draft, and it's important to emphasize this group is post-draft. The Dolphins are going to have a June 1st influx of $18.5 million in cap space at their disposal to add to the team that I have assembled, which those of you who are watching on YouTube can see up on the screen. Offensive line, starting offensive line of Teron Armstead, Christian Haynes, Aaron Brewer, Damian Lewis, Austin Jackson, Tua Tagovailoa. Top two backs are Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane, with Alec Ingold at fullback, Noah Fant, the top tight end, Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, top wide receivers, with rookie Malachi Corley from Western Kentucky and Eric Ezukama as players that are going to have to step into a big role. Defensively, Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips, their status, they have asterisks. It's in question, their start of the season timeline. On the interior, it's Zach Sealer and rookie McKinley Jackson, who was a late third-round target. Linebackers David Long and The aforementioned Jerome Baker, who maybe is back. I'd like to see him back. Starting outside corners, Jalen Ramsey and Cam Smith with Kader Kohu in the nickel. And then the safeties from last year, Javon Holland and Deshaun Elliott back in the lineup. This is pre-June 1st, and I emphasize that because after you get all your rookies under contract, assuming a Tua Tagovailoa contract extension is done, you have about $12 million in cap space. And then the Xavier Howard money hits, you go back up to over $30 million in cap space. You could do a lot of damage with $30 million in cap space. If we're being completely honest, the question is instead, what is available post June 1st? And I have some thoughts on what I would like to spend the dollars on. I'd like another pass rusher just as additional insurance for the injuries to the top two guys. Well, we did bring back Andrew Van Ginkel in free agency on a 2-year, $50 million deal. You drafted first-round pick was Darius Robinson from Missouri. Brought in Marquise Haynes Sr. from Carolina as a low-dollar free agent. But if both those top two guys aren't ready to go for the start of the year, or if you want to give them the runway, post-June 1st edge rusher is probably a preferable target. Here's the good news. These were post-June 1st signings and the dollar amounts they signed for in 2023. These are actual post-June 1st edge rusher signings. Leonard Floyd, 1 year, $7 million. He was the Bills' best edge rusher in 2023. 1 year, $7 million post-June 1st signing. Frank Clark, he didn't make it to the end of the year with the Broncos. That's neither here nor there. $5.5 million post-June 1st signing. DeJuan Smoot, really underrated rotational pass rush type with the Jaguars. He was coming off an injury the previous season in 2022, which kind of fed into him being on the market and not having a bigger market. He signed for $4.5 million post-June 1st. Jadeveon Clowney signed for $2.5 million in Baltimore post-June 1st. Had one of the better seasons of his NFL career. Yannick Ngakoue signs with the Chicago Bears for $10.5 post-June 1st. Trey Flowers, of course, familiar name, former New England Patriot, signed with the Dolphins for a short stint. He signed post-June 1st as well for under $2 million. So I say all that to say between Leonard Floyd, Jadeveon Clowney, and Yannick Ngakoue, you had some successful post-June 1st additions. And some of these for really, the Clowney for $2.5 million for what he did this past year is one of the best contracts in football. Now, there's other spots that I think you could probably benefit from having another corner. When you consider, I brought Rock Ya-Sin in free agency, and Jerry Jones from Florida State was a day 3 draft selection, but the top 3 guys are guys that were here last year. Ramsey, Kohu, who struggled a little bit, and Cam Smith, who's kind of an incomplete evaluation, but they seem to be setting him up for having every opportunity in the world to be the starter. So you have Rock Ya-Sin as an insurance policy as a third outside corner, kind of in the Eli Apple role from the roster this past year. But then behind that is a rookie, and then Justin Bethel is a special teams player who I chose to bring back. So corner is another targeted area. Defensive tackle, you're going to have to find something. I will say this, and I'm going to put myself on the screen for this one. I don't know what the timeline would look like for a transaction involving this player, but I think the funniest, most galaxy-brained idea that I've had in doing all of this, right, is there's a lot of discussion and debate about Christian Wilkins and paying Christian Wilkins and whether the Dolphins should do it and the ramifications of letting him go, so on and so forth. He's going to probably go somewhere and get $25+ million per season. I have decided the funniest thing in the world that Chris Grier could do, we all know he likes a trade splash, right? Traded for Jalen Ramsey, traded for Bradley Chubb, traded for Tyreek Hill. What if you got post-June 1st and the $18 million kicked in? You know who's been consistently on the trade block for like 2 years and their team's going to be bad again this year? Jonathan Allen from the Washington Commanders. He's owed $29.5 million in cash over the next 2 years combined. He is also like 10 months older than Christian Wilkins. So he's almost the same age. You'd have to send a draft pick. But if you're going to get a comp pick for Christian Wilkins and you're banking on it, and you know with how they structure their initial compensatory free agent window strategy that they're going to box that pick in and they're going to get a 3, how funny would it be to trade for Jonathan Allen and pay him this year $14 million in cash? Maybe you do an extension. Maybe you don't do an extension. You could potentially take it on a 1-year rental for $14 million when you have the post-June 1st $18.5 million that opens up, and all of a sudden you're replacing Christian Wilkins via trade with Jonathan Allen, and you're paying him half the cash that Wilkins is going to get on his new deal. Like that's the kind of really like slinky stuff that teams do sometimes that you just can't help but like sit back and chuckle about. Allen, if he is traded, they obviously traded both their edge rushers last year in season. They do have Daron Payne under contract. They're going to be a team in transition. They got new ownership. They're picking number 2 overall. They're not going to be good. Allen getting towards the tail end of this contract that he signed. He signed a 4-year, $72 million contract in 2021. Again, $14 million in cash this season, and then $15.5 million in cash next season in base salary when he's on his age 30 season. Is that a splash that they could make? I mean, he's in the same tier as Christian Wilkins as a player, in my opinion. He's been a very successful player for a long time. He hasn't, I guess he did have the peak in 2021 of 9 sacks. He's had 8, 6, 2, 9, 7.5, 5.5. He's got 40 career sacks. He's a good player and kind of in the same age range and for less cash potentially, but you got to part with a pick to do that. And we obviously know Miami's in this transition limbo with what they're doing with their roster, but that's another, like, if he's still available via trade post June 1st, depending on what the price tag is, that's kind of along the lines of what kinds of moves Miami has made. So I have it on the post June 1st potential because, again, you're going to go to $30.6 million in cap space post June 1st. Now, you'll have to budget some for the practice squad. You'll have to budget some for injuries that take place throughout the course of the season. We'll get into that next year, in addition to a 53-man roster projection after my offseason blueprint. If you missed the earlier stuff this week, you can listen to the whole thing. Now you can binge listen to the whole thing and get the full picture in one shot. It's about 2.5, 3 hours of content of my favorite stuff every year. So we're going to get to that 53-man forecast up next year on this episode of Locked On Dolphins, so stick with us. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on that 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim is as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. The 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. You must keep the Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA, available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. So we've talked about, for this 2024 Miami Dolphins offseason blueprint, post-June 1st cap influx. I would personally budget maybe $12 million of that into spending, whether that's going out and getting a vet player via a trade, or whether that's if Leonard Floyd's still out there, that'd be an awesome addition. I don't know what his market's going to look like, but he has kind of came out and alluded to, when leaving the Bills this past offseason, said, I want to go to a team that's going to compete, that's going to pay me money. And there's some guys that's how they operate their business. Xavier Howard's like that. I think case in point, you heard him on Joe Rose the other day, talk about the door shut to Miami. Obviously, there's loss of income there. He's going to have to go find a new contract. Doesn't seem like that's a warm and fuzzy situation, but some guys just operate that way, and it is a business, right? I know some people want to know is from the player perspective, doing right by players who are developed in-house versus guys who are a little bit more about their business. Rashad Jones was like that. He impressed that on Xavier Howard and one of his mentors. So there's guys that are going to be on the market for different reasons into that late stage. What I didn't want to do is I didn't want to assume anyone was going to be out there. So, like, for example, we made some investments in the running back room. If you told me Derrick Henry's still on the market post June 1st, he's top of my list. I can't guarantee Derrick Henry's going to be out there. If you told me that Leonard Floyd or Jadeveon Clowney is going to be out there post June 1st, that's a really attractive option for the Dolphins to go out and sign with that $18.5 million in cap influx that they're going to get. I can't guarantee that's going to happen. So what I have is a couple of placeholders, but the actual position investments for the post-June 1st thing, I think are a little bit more fluid. So I do have a 53-man roster projection for Miami. And we're going to get into that. I'm going to put that up on the screen now for those of you who are watching on YouTube. The biggest thing on the offensive side of the ball is a two quarterback roster now. With the way that they've changed the third quarterback, the emergency quarterback, and practice squad rules and all that stuff, I think you need the contributors in other spots to eat 3 spots on a quarterback. So people asked me at the beginning of this process, you could have saved a couple $1 million by moving on from Mike White. Why didn't you move on from Mike White? Because I want Mike White to be the backup quarterback and the only other quarterback on the 53. I know Miami almost won the playoff game with Skylar Thompson in Buffalo. I get it. But they got a defensive touchdown. They had another interception that set them up on a short field before halftime and a game that they were getting blown out of. And quite frankly, when you watch that back, it was a miracle they were in that game in spite of Skylar Thompson. So spare me. And I know the Never Tua crowd says, oh, well, Skylar's better than Tua. Skylar, develop Skylar. There's a whole sub-fan club there. But if you're talking objectively about it, I mean, somebody was smashing Mike White for being the highest paid third string quarterback. On what planet was Mike White the third string quarterback last year? He wasn't. He was the backup quarterback. And he's significantly better than Skylar Thompson to my assessment. So I have 2 quarterbacks on the 53, Tua Tagovailoa and Mike White. I have 5 backs total, including Alec Ingold. Raheem Mostert, quality starter. Devon Achane, adequate starter. Want to see more volume before we put him into that quality starter bucket. But if he thrives through a higher volume workload, then he's going to be a quality starter at a minimum. Isaac Garendo, the rookie 5th-round pick in my mock draft that was run yesterday from University of Louisville, 220 pounds, super explosive back, kind of raw developmental type. Chris Brooks, and then Alec Ingold as a quality starter at fullback. The wide receivers, I have 6 on the 53-man projection. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, roster cornerstones, duh. Malachi Corley, the 3rd-round pick in the mock draft from yesterday from Western Kentucky. And Eric Ezukama. So those are your 2 kind of physical, bigger framed guys, Corley and Ezukama. And then I have River Craycraft back for his chemistry, slot potential in your 10 personnel groupings, and special teams contributions, and then Devin Duvernay as another similar player who's going to be your primary return specialist as well. I think those 2 guys are quality depth options in your wide receiver room. So Hill, Waddle, Corley, Ezukama, Craycraft, Duvernay, your wide receivers. Tight ends, Noah Fant. I know they signed Jonnu Smith. I'll say it again. For those of you who might not have caught it the first time, I'm not changing it because I want to have my finished product to compare against their finished product and not update these transactions in real time. So I preferred to go for Noah Fant. This was one of the marquee free agent signings. I signed him for $3 million or $8 million per on a 3-year deal. $24 million was the average of that contract. He's an adequate starter with upside to be a quality starter. Durham Smythe, quality depth option. Julian Hill, incomplete evaluation. And then Ryman, the tight end, Tip Ryman, the tight end from Illinois, was the 239th pick in the offseason blueprint, kind of your developmental heir to Smythe. So this is a little bit of a bigger skill group between Garendo and Corley and Ezukanma back this year, and Fant, along with Ryman, some more size in the skill group, which I think is a necessary must. Now, I'm really banking on the positional versatility of the offensive line because I'm only carrying 9. The 9 are Teron Armstead, quality starter. He'd be a cornerstone if there was more consistent availability. Several adequate level starters, projected starter at center, Aaron Brewer, projected starter at guard, Damian Lewis from Seattle, Brewers from Tennessee. Those are 2 free agent signings for my blueprint. Austin Jackson back this year on a contract. He's an adequate starter. And the other projected starter is Christian Haynes, the guard from Connecticut. That was the 2nd-round draft choice. So that's your starting 5. And then we brought back Kendall Lamb as a swing tackle. I brought back Isaiah Wynn, who has guard tackle flexibility. And when he was a starter last year, he was an adequate level starter. It's just the injury issues have always been there. So that's an upgrade for your backup guard tackle flex player, which last year that top option was Eichenberg. Eichenberg's on the roster, backup center snap capabilities, and then Keon Smith I'm holding on to as well. I think there's something there. They got a real player there as well. So we'll get to the defensive side of the ball next for the 53-man roster forecast, including there are some of those floating post-June 1st editions. I'd love to get 2 or 3 of them. I got placeholders for them. But again, in reality, it's impossible for me to tell you, hey, here's the free agent crop, and these are the guys that are going to stick around post-June 1st for us to be able to sign. Can't do it with that level of intensity, so I've got 3 placeholder spots, but it could be a running back if a good running back's out there. It could be good edge rusher. It could be a good corner, a safety. We'll get into that and the defensive side of the ball for the rest of the 53-man roster projection. And then the 2025 salary cap health update that is next here on Locked On Dolphins. Snag tickets without the stress over at Gametime. Gametime is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase, and they're obsessed with finding you ways to save money on tickets. You can see the view from your seat before you buy. You can get all-in pricing upfront, so there's no surprises when you put those tickets in your cart and then go to your checkout. No hidden fees in that regard. You can buy tickets in seconds with just a few taps on your phone, and they also are offering zone deals where you pick the section and Gametime picks the seats for big-time savings. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. So we'll dive right into the defensive and special teams portion. I'm carrying 4 interior defensive linemen. I know the Dolphins have added between Davion Nixon, Isaiah Mack. They've been bringing some bodies in there. I don't think that bodes well for Christian Wilkins. But they've been bringing some guys in, trying to get guys some familiarity with the system. If you get enough flyers for competition, maybe somebody elevates their game, but it seems like they're really going to invest there. I only have 4 roster spots on the 53, and one of those is a post-June 1st vet. That is a spot. I don't care what kind of talent's out there. Somebody with some starting experience, I think you're going to need to add to the mix, whether they are an A-gap defender and a nose tackle type, or there are a penetration type of player. You do have Zach Sealer. McKinley Jackson was a 3rd-round draft choice. Fali Fatukasi, who was cut by Jacksonville. He's kind of been bouncing around with some visits already because he's a street free agent. I'd have a lot of interest there if I were Miami as well. You're going to start bringing in 320-pound defensive linemen for competition. Fatukasi be at the top of my list, and he shouldn't be expensive. But I do think you need to add a post-June 1st vet to that room for it to be functional this season. The edge group, I think all things considered with the questions for Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb with their injuries, they have to be on the 53 for the start of the season. From an IR perspective, if they have to go on IR, they're not going to be ready to go. But you do have to pass them through the initial phase, and I think unless they're on the PUP. But Van Ginkel was brought back in free agency, so that's your third edge, assuming Chubb and Phillips when they get back. Darius Robinson, a first-round rookie out of Missouri, a lot of versatility for alignment where he can line up. I think that helps you. You just kind of have to decide what weight you want to play him at in year one. Marquise Haynes Sr. from Carolina, that's your fifth edge. And then again, depending on the outlook for Phillips and Chubb, whether it's Clowney, whether it's Leonard Floyd, whether it's Frank Clark, whether it's like somebody else, just somebody to be a bridge, an early season bridge. If you need it, post-June 1st money can go there. And reminder, you got, as of post-June 1st, you have $30.6 million to work with. If you budget about 10 to 12 million of that, you can find a few meaningful players that can be contributors in 2024, but not necessarily long-term additions. Linebackers, David Long. I had worked out the contract restructure / extension with Jerome Baker, so I'd have had him back. I'd have ran back that linebacker room. I know Duke Riley kind of upset some people at the end of the year. He's an excellent special teams player, though, and a rangy, effective backup linebacker. And he plays teams, and the Dolphins don't have a lot of teams guys. They need more teams guys. So I'm certainly not going to run off one of the ones that you have that can actually contribute in that phase. And it's just a shame when there's injuries that elevate his role and take him out of some of those opportunities. And then Channing Tindall is going to have to do something. And if you don't love this group, that's another potential post-June 1st spot. I don't have a placeholder set for it on the graphic, but it's very easy for you to, if you don't need an edge group, if Phillips is going to be ready to go for the start of the season and Chubb's maybe only going to miss a couple of weeks, maybe you don't go for the post-June 1st vetted edge, and maybe that guy goes instead in the linebacker room to give you some more competition. I think with the Dolphins obviously moving on from Jerome Baker, they're going to have to add somebody in reality anyway, whether that's bringing Baker back for cheaper or not. I think the Drew Tranquil contract, he just signed an extension in Kansas City for $6.3 per, I think sets a ceiling for Baker. I don't expect Baker to get more than that. So I think that actually helps Jerome's outlook to potentially come back to the team with what that Tranquil contract was signed at. Corners, cornerstone Jalen Ramsey, second-year player Cam Smith, Kader Kohu, who I have graded as an adequate level starter. He was a quality starter after year one and really struggled last year. You're hoping with more experience, he can kind of recapture what he was really good at early in his career. Rock Ya-Sin coming over from Baltimore on a short-term deal as a third outside corner. I think he's a quality depth option. If he's not starting on the outside, you're okay. If he is, maybe you'd be wanting a better player. So I think this is another spot that one of those 2 to 3 positions where 2 to 3 spots on the 53 for a $12 million budget for post-June 1st spending, you could target a spot here. Jerrion Jones was a rookie from the draft class out of Florida State. Justin Bethel, special teams player. 4 safeties I have booked. Elijah Campbell is back in real life as well, not just my blueprints. He signed yesterday. Deshaun Elliott, who I chose to bring back. Javon Holland, a roster cornerstone. I think Elliott's an adequate starter. I do think you need another body, though. So I do think defensive line and safety without I have it set up, you're going to need somebody with playing experience. Now, the good news is if it's a interior non-pass rusher, they're relatively cheap and they're not in high demand. And safeties right now, their demand's never been lower. Case in point, look across the NFL at how many safeties, quality safeties, or adequate level, starting level safeties are available. It is absolutely insane what it looks like. So that would put you through that group. If you spent the full $12 million budget that I have for post-June 1st spending out of the 18 that you get, by the time you cut to 53, in reality, your salary cap health, you have $20.36 million, or about $20.5 million. But you need to be budgeted for the practice squad. And the way that they have the practice squad set up, you can have 6 players on the practice squad who have a weekly payment for being on the practice squad, and it doesn't matter how many years of league experience they have. The total for those players, those 6 non-limited tenure practice squad players, guys like what Robbie Chosen was last year, right? Melvin Ingram, if you signed him and brought him back on the practice squad and then elevated him on game day, guys like that. For the full season, you need to budget $2.2 million for those 6 players on the practice squad. The other 10 players are players that have league experience limits. You need to budget for those 10 players $2.1 million. So in total, you need about $4.2 million in cap space. You need to have pre-set aside before the league year starts to ensure that you have the cap space that you need for the week-by-week payments to your practice squad players. And that's non-guaranteed. It changes every week. So it's not necessarily set in stone. Maybe some days you carry less vested veterans and you save a couple $100,000 by the end of the season. But it's easy to just kind of gloss over practice squad, guys, that it's part of the cap. So here, as far as perspective, Miami had $9.8 million in operating cap before the start of the season. They ended the season with $1.7 million in cap space after signings and injuries and practice squad throughout the course of the season. So they burned between practice squad and injuries and in-season signings, they burned about $8 million in cap, which is why it was important for me to have a tangible amount of 53-man final cap at your disposal, because after the practice squad and this 53 forecast we just walked through, you end up having $16 million in cap space. So if you burn another $8 million between injuries, and hopefully the injuries are a little kinder to us this year than they were last year, and practice squad, but practice squad's already budgeted, it's taken out of that 16, right? So it's technically 20 and a half versus 9.8. You got 2.5 times the cap space at the start of the year. You're going to have an opportunity to have some rollover for 2025, because what you don't use, it's not like that saying, if you don't use it, what's that, 40-year-old virgin? Is it true what they say? If you don't use it, you lose it. That's not true with cap space. You can roll it over into the following year, which is really helpful for Miami, especially if they can sit in this operating cap where you could say, hey, we're going to leave a little wiggle room so that we can roll over several $1 million to help us as we continue the transition out of old wave of big contracts into new wave of big contracts. The last thing I wanted to leave you guys with is the 2025 cap health update. So what I have is I have a table with all the players that are accounted for in this 53-man forecast. And I have 2024, 2025, and 2026 salary caps available. The dead cap for players like Xavier Howard is reflected in both 2024 and 2025. The practice squad budget is reflected in 2024. The Dolphins salary cap hit is courtesy of Over the Cap. With the rollover cap from this past year is projected at $256.5 million. The roster that I have put together, including the practice squad budget, has $240.1 million in commitments, hence the $16.3 million in cap space. For 2025, you have I'm projecting $17 million in growth annually. That's smaller than what the jump was from 2023 to 2024 by almost half. But I don't want to come in here and blow smoke up your rear end and tell you everything's going to be honky-dory and everything's fine. Try to be conservative. I try to be over-aggressive with player values. I try to be conservative with the cap budget so that there's wiggle room for reality to break in a way that's more favorable for the forecast versus the forecast than giving you the smallest amount of money you could spend on players and the highest amount of salary cap space that you could possibly get. I say all that to say cap goes up $17 million. And with the players that are under contract and the contracts that we talked about in this hypothetical 2024 offseason blueprint, Miami is minus $31 million in cap space for the end of 2024, going into February and March before they have to get cap compliant in 2025. That may sound daunting. We've paid out Tua Tagovailoa on a big contract extension. But remember, one of the things that I did with the Tua Tagovailoa contract extension was the first 3 years of that, you automatically are prorating the bonuses. So you can't fudge with the numbers there. The year 2 on the contract that I offered was $22.5 million as a cap hit. That's static. And then 2026 would be $29.5 million or $29.5 million. You can't restructure those. You restructured them up front. So that's the bad news. The good news is I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, approximately a dozen levers that Miami can pull when you're going into 2025 with minus $30 million in cap space. That does not account for rollover cap from 2024 either. So if the Dolphins, they go into the season with 16.3, which is what I have them down for, and they use $9 million to sign players because of injuries, which would be a really bad season in that regard. And then you finish with $7 million. You can roll the $7 million over into 2025, and now minus 31 is minus 24 before you touch any contracts. You can do things with both Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Part of the reason why the 2025 figure is so inflated is because I have both the Jalen Waddle and the Jalen Phillips fifth-year options, which are 1 year fully guaranteed salaries on the books. Waddle's is 15.59. You can sign Jalen Waddle to a contract extension, and you could probably save $8 to $10 million of his $15.959 million cap hit. Tyreek Hill, he's on the books for $40.5 million. He's got 2 years left on his deal, including a 2026 figure of $62.5 million after you restructure him this year. This is a player where you could take the exit ramp, but I think it would be more beneficial to give Tyreek Hill a contract extension, add a few years to the back end of this, and then there's a little bit more grace for your exit strategy as he continues to age, and you can kind of collect a little bit more information when the right time to get out of that contract is. Your offensive tackles, you can restructure the year 2 deal of new deals or new money on the Austin Jackson contract, and you can save $7 million in cap space in 2025 by doing a basic contract restructure of Austin Jackson. We didn't touch Teron Armstead's contract in 2024 offseason blueprint. You could cut him outright, or if he retires, he could outright retire, and you could save $7.94 million against the cap. The post-June 1st savings, if you process that post-June 1st, you'd save $14.3 million versus $8. You could cut Durham Smythe. Look, I'm paying Noah Fant. I got Tip Ryman in here on a rookie contract. I'm probably not going to continue paying Durham Smythe. He'll be in the last year of his contract in 2025. You could save $3.4 million there. You sign Noah Fant to a contract extension, that he'd be going into year 2 of his contract. If you restructured the way that I structured it, you could save $4 million in cap space. Damian Lewis got the 3-year, $30 million contract. You could restructure him and save $4 million in cap space. Same rules apply for Jalen Phillips with his 13.25 fully guaranteed 5th-year option. You can give him the contract extension that he's going to have earned and save probably $8 to $10 million against the cap there. Andrew Van Ginkel. Could you move on from Andrew Van Ginkel? You say, look, we got Chubb, we got Phillips, we got Robinson, we got Van Ginkel. Van Ginkel's year 2 cap hit goes up. I did put a void year on the back end of that 2-year, $15 million contract that kind of spread out and minimizes year 1 impact. Could you move on from Andrew if he's your 3rd edge? Or are you going to move on from Bradley Chubb? We restructured Bradley Chubb in 2024, but you could post June 1st Bradley Chubb in 2025 if you needed to and get off of that contract, and you would open $20 million in cap space for 2025 and then an additional $11.7 million in cap space versus what you're currently scheduled for in 2026. If you're watching on YouTube, that's reflected in the bottom left corner. I signed Isaiah Wynn to a 2-year, $4 million deal. If you wanted to sign a 1-year, $2 million deal, that's off the books, but you'd also add the $2 million right back into what's available for Miami anyway. I think Jalen Ramsey, in the same light of Tyreek Hill, is a contract extension candidate. I worked this one out and sat down and said, look, if Jalen Ramsey gets a 3-year, $60 million contract extension, and that's the hardest thing about this, is Jalen Ramsey might say, I want more than $60 million, and be like, okay, well, this is what I'm offering. And if he says no, then you're in the same boat the Dolphins ended up with Christian Wilkins, right? Where he says, well, I'm not going to sign it because I want more. But I think 3 years, 60 is a fair value for Ramsey. If you gave him a 3-year, $60 million contract extension with how we've now max restructured him in 2024 with his signing bonus and his roster bonus and his base salary, you could save $13 million in cap space on Jalen Ramsey. And he already has void years on the back end of his deal. So he's already going to be on your books in 2026, 2027. So it makes sense to have him under contract beyond those years anyway, actually under contract to play for your team. And then Jason Sanders, you can move on from him in 2025 and save $3.3 million against the cap. So in all, Miami coming in before rollover cap, before anything, projected with a conservative cap growth forecast, minus $31 million against the cap. You have $72.3 million in fluidity without trade candidates, plus the potential $20 million exit rate for Bradley Chubb. No issue getting compliant. And because we had a bigger rookie draft class, you got more players under contract, so you have less spots to fill. And really, here's your key expiring contracts. David Long, Javon Holland, 32-year-old Raheem Mostert, and swing tackle Kendall Lamb amidst the Teron Armstead exit ramp that you'd be taking one way or another. It's not as daunting as a list as this year's. And again, running back, linebacker, low value safety. These are the economic positions across the league that the value's low. So maybe you bring back David Long. Certainly you'd love to bring back Javon Holland. You can open up the cap space to allow that to happen, but the lengths in which you have to go to get compliant and fill out 51 players is less extreme than what it was in 2024. I'm not going to say that it's easy. Okay. I know some people have taken exception to last year. I said the Dolphins could do whatever they want. And it's true. They could do whatever they want. They have chosen not to do we're going to drive the car over the edge of the cliff in pursuit of landing on the other side, Fast and Furious style. Okay. I respect that. You want to transition within your winning window for the long-term viability of your jobs. Great. But they could have pushed the chips in if they wanted to. And they'd have brought the whole nucleus back, and then you probably have to blow it up in 2026. Or if not in 2026, in 2027, you definitely have to blow it up. I kind of respect the fact that they saw the way this season went and said, hey, you know what? We need to make some fundamental changes. That is the 2024 Miami Dolphins offseason blueprint. I hope you guys enjoyed. And I know we went long today. And my condolences to Ross Jackson, my boss over at Locked On, for going long today. But this one had to have it. We had to get the whole thing in, and we had to cover my pathway to a competitive team in 2024 based on the understanding of what the Dolphins wanted to achieve and what direction they were going to go. We'll see what the Dolphins do now. Free agency starts next week. I'm Kyle Krabs. Keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. I'm out of here. Fins up.